Dr. Harlan Briggs slammed his hand on the counter and pointed his finger directly at Sarah Calloway's face. "Get out of my trauma bay," he snapped loud enough for every nurse, every tech, every resident in the room to hear. "You are a floor nurse. You do not make calls in here. You do not speak unless spoken to. Am I clear?" Sarah did not flinch. She did not look away. She just stood there holding the chart and said nothing. And right then, nobody in that room could have guessed what she was about to do. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let us get into it. The call came in at 6:47 in the morning. Sarah Calloway was at the nurses' station on the 4th floor of Sharp Memorial Hospital in San Diego, finishing up a handoff report from the night shift when the overhead announcement crackled through the entire building. Trauma activation, level 1, ETA 4 minutes. Multiple gunshot wounds. Military personnel, 1 K9 unit on scene. She heard it and she paused for just a second, pen hovering over the paper. Then she went back to writing. It was not her department. It was not her problem. That was what she told herself every single morning when she walked through those doors. Keep your head down. Do your job. Do not make waves. That had been her philosophy at Sharp Memorial for the past 2 years, ever since she transferred here from Bethesda, and it had served her well enough. Nobody gave her trouble. Nobody gave her much of anything, actually. She was just Sarah. Quiet Sarah. Floor nurse Sarah, who never pushed back and never caused a scene. Which was exactly the way she wanted it. She capped her pen and stood up, reaching for her coffee when she heard it again. This time it was not the overhead. It was Janelle, the charge nurse, practically sprinting past the station with wide eyes and a look on her face that Sarah had not seen before. "Sarah," Janelle said, grabbing her arm without slowing down. "Trauma Bay 2, right now. They need every available hand." "I am not trauma certified for—" "I know what you are certified for. Go." There was something in Janelle's voice. Not panic exactly, something tighter than that. Something that made Sarah put down the coffee and follow. She heard the dog before she saw anything else. That low, sustained growl rolled out from behind the double doors of Trauma Bay 2 like something alive and warning. Not barking, not yelping. That specific frequency that every person who has ever worked with military working dogs knows means one thing: I will take your hand off at the wrist if you come one step closer. Sarah pushed through the doors and stopped. The scene in front of her was unlike anything she had witnessed in 2 years at this hospital. There were 8, maybe 9 people crowded near the entrance of the bay, pressed against the walls, not one of them moving forward. 2 security guards stood frozen near the equipment cart. A respiratory tech had his hands raised like he was being robbed. 3 residents stood shoulder to shoulder in the corner, none of them speaking. And in the middle of the room, lying on the gurney, was a man. He was in a tactical vest, partially cut away. His face was gray pale and wet with sweat. There were 2 IV lines dangling from a portable bag that someone had managed to hook up during transport, but the bag was nearly empty and nobody was replacing it. His chest was rising and falling, but barely. His left side was wrapped in field dressing that had soaked completely through. He was running out of time, and between him and everyone else in that room was the dog. A Belgian Malinois, maybe 70 pounds, standing directly over the man's legs, with every muscle in its body locked and loaded. Its eyes swept the room in a continuous arc, missing nothing. Every time someone shifted their weight, that growl deepened. Every time someone took a breath that sounded too sharp, the dog's ears went flat. "What is the situation?" Sarah asked, stepping up beside Janelle. "He came in with the unit," Janelle said quietly. "The dog will not let anyone approach. Transport said he was the same way in the ambulance. Wouldn't let the paramedics do anything past initial stabilization. The handler is apparently still in the field. There is nobody here who can command him. Has anyone tried and nearly lost fingers?" Dara looked at this man on the gurney. She looked at the dog. She looked at the IV bag, almost empty, and the monitors that had been set up from a distance, showing a heart rate of 44. "Where is Briggs?" she asked. As if on cue, the double doors behind her burst open. Dr. Harlan Briggs did not walk into a room. He arrived in it. 6'2", silver-haired, with the kind of institutional authority that had been building for 30 years and never let anyone forget it. He was the chief of trauma surgery at Sharp Memorial, and he moved through this hospital like he had personally built every wall in it. He took one look at the scene and his jaw tightened. "Why," he said in a voice that was perfectly level and somehow more frightening for it, "is my patient not being treated?" Nobody answered. The dog growled. Briggs looked at the bum. The dog looked at Briggs. Something passed between them that was not mutual respect. "Get animal control on the phone," Briggs said. "Get that dog sedated and removed from my trauma bay." "Sir," one of the residents said, "animal control has a 20-minute ETA and the patient—" "Then call the MPs. Call whoever you have to call. I want that animal out of here in the next 5 minutes." He turned to the group. "Someone get me a line on that patient. Someone get me a crash cart position. Move." The team started moving carefully around the edges of the room. The dog's growl became something else entirely. Not louder, worse. A frequency that went through the sternum. One of the residents, a young man named Park, who Sarah had seen around the floor and always thought was brave to the point of being reckless, took a single step toward the gurney with a fresh IV bag. The dog lunged. It did not bite. It did not need to. It stopped exactly 8 inches from Park's arm, with its teeth showing, and a sound coming out of it that made everyone in the room take 2 steps backwards simultaneously. Park dropped the IV bag. It hit the floor. The dog watched it land and then returned to its position over the man. "Okay," Briggs said, and now there was something underneath the authority. Not fear, but something adjacent to it. "Okay, new plan. Everyone hold position. Do not approach. Do not—" "I can get to him," Sarah said. The room went quiet in a specific way, not the quiet of people who had not heard something, the quiet of people who very much had. Briggs turned and looked at her like she had just spoken in a language he did not recognize. "Excuse me. I can get to the patient," Sarah said again. "Let me tricky." He stared at her for a moment. She could see him running the calculation. He did not know her name. She could tell by the way his eyes moved across her badge without recognition. 2 years in this hospital, and he did not know her name, which told her everything she had ever needed to know about how this man saw the people around him. "Get out of my trauma bay," he said. "You are a floor nurse. You do not make calls in here. You do not speak unless spoken to. Am I clear?" And this was the moment. This was the one Sarah had been avoiding for 2 years. The moment where the version of herself that kept her head down and made no waves would have nodded and stepped back, would have said "yes, sir," and returned to the 4th floor and finished her coffee and gone about her day. She did not step back. She looked at Briggs for exactly 3 seconds, just long enough for him to understand that she had heard him, and then she turned away from him and walked toward the dog. The room reacted immediately. "Hey," Briggs started. "Someone stop her," a resident said. "Don't," Janelle breathed. Sarah did not stop. She did not slow down. She did not rush. She walked at the same pace she had walked every hall of every hospital she had ever worked, in steady and even, and she kept her eyes on the dog. Ghost, she thought. Military working dogs with this level of protection, training almost always had names that meant something. Shadow, Titan, Ghost. She did not know his name yet, but she addressed him anyway, not with words at first, just with her posture, with the deliberate absence of threat that she had learned a long time ago in a place very different from this hospital. The dog watched her come. The growl continued, but it changed, just slightly. The frequency shifted. Anyone who did not know dogs would not have heard it. Sarah heard it. She stopped 6 feet away and crouched down, not making herself small, so much as making herself equal. Eye level. She held both hands open at her sides, palms forward. She breathed out slowly. "Hey," she said quietly. I know you are doing your job. I know you are not going to let anyone near him. That is good. That is exactly what you were trained to do." The dog's ears moved, not all the way back, not all the way forward, something in between. "Nobody is going to hurt him," she said. "I need you to let me help him. Because right now the thing hurting him is not in this room. It is inside him, and I am the only one who can reach it." She heard Briggs say something behind her, something sharp and dismissive, but it was very far away now. She reached slowly to the inside of her left forearm and pushed up her sleeve. The tattoo was not large. It was precise. A parachute beneath a guardian angel rendered in clean black lines with a small set of wings on either side. Underneath it, in letters small enough that you had to be close to read them, was a single word, Anon. Guardian. It was the insignia of the 38th Rescue Squadron. Para-Rescue. PJ. The quiet professionals who jumped out of aircraft into combat zones to bring people back alive. The ones who trained alongside military working dogs for exactly these situations. The ones who smelled and moved and sounded like the people these animals were trained to trust. She held her arm out toward the dog. Ghost went still. Not the stillness of an animal deciding whether to attack. The stillness of a recognition. His nose worked the air. His ears came fully forward. The growl stopped, and then in a motion that made every single person in that room exhale at once, Ghost stepped to the side. Just one step. Just enough. Sarah was moving before he finished stepping. She reached the gurney and her hands were already in motion. She picked up the empty IV bag and turned to the nearest tech who was staring at her with his mouth open. Lactated ringers wide open right now, she said. I need 2 units of O-negative on a warmer. Get me a chest seal kit and get me a thoracic tray because that field dressing is not holding and we are about to have a tension pneumo on our hands. Move. The tech moved. Janelle moved. Even the residents moved, but because something had changed in the room. The variable that had been paralyzing all of them was gone, and in its place was a voice that expected to be followed. Briggs had not moved. Sarah glanced at him once as she pulled on gloves. He was standing exactly where he had been, arms crossed, watching her with an expression she could not entirely read. Part of it was professional assessment. Part of it was something he had not expected to feel. You need to get scrubbed in, she said, not unkindly but very directly. He is going to need surgical intervention. I can get him stable enough to move, but that is your half. A moment passed. It might have been the longest moment in the room. Then Briggs walked to the scrub sink without a word. Sarah turned back to the patient. She cut away the remaining field dressing with practiced efficiency and confirmed what she had suspected. The wound track was deeper than it appeared on the surface, and the right side of his chest was starting to show the subtle but unmistakable signs of pressure building in the wrong place. She called out the readings before the monitor tech had finished placing the sensors, not because she was showing off, but because she had seen this before and the numbers were already written in the way his body was responding. 44 beats per minute became 51 as the IV wide opened. Ghost remained at the foot of the gurney, watching everything calm, now tail low present. One of the younger nurses, a woman named Daria, who had been against the wall for the past 10 minutes, edged toward the gurney carefully and looked at the dog and then at Sarah. Does he know you? Daria asked. No, Sarah said. Then how did he? He knows what I am, Sarah said. Daria looked at the tattoo still visible on Sarah's forearm. She didn't ask anything else. The next 12 minutes moved in that particular way that time moves in a trauma bay when someone finally knows what they are doing. Fast in terms of actions, slow in terms of perception. Every call was right. Every transition was smooth. The team that had been frozen became fluid, not because anyone ordered them to, but because competence is contagious, and they were following someone who had done this before, not in a hospital, not with monitors and trays and overhead lighting, but in much harder places than this. When they wheeled Lieutenant Commander David Reyes toward the elevator to the OR, his heart rate was 68 and his pressure was 90/60, and the right side of his chest was no longer killing him. Ghost walked alongside the gurney until the elevator doors closed, and then he sat down in the hallway and waited. Sarah stripped her gloves and stood at the nurse's station writing in the chart when she heard footsteps behind her. Deliberate, considered. Briggs, she did not turn around. You have PJ training, he said. It was not a question. Yes, she said. You did not list that on your application. No, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Why not? She finished the line she was writing, capped her pen, and finally turned to look at him. His expression had changed. The institutional authority was still there, because that did not go anywhere. But there was something else now, something that had not been there an hour ago. Because every time I list it, she said, people spend the next 6 months talking about what I used to do instead of what I am doing now. And I am here to do it, Bob, not to be a story. Briggs looked at her for a long moment. His jaw moved like he was working on something. Then he said very quietly, You saved his life. We saved his life, she said. Your half still has to work. And she picked up her chart and walked back toward the elevator, back toward the fourth floor, back toward her coffee that was certainly cold by now. Behind her in the hallway outside the OR ghost was still sitting by the elevator doors, patient, certain, waiting for the man on the other side to come back. He had let one person through today. One person who smelled like someone his handler would trust. One person who moved like someone who had made impossible calls in impossible places and carried the weight of that quietly without asking anyone to acknowledge it. One person who wore a tattoo not for decoration, but as a record of who she was, for the world decided what box to put her in. Sarah Calloway had not saved a life and demanded a parade. She had saved a life and gone back to work. But in that hospital, in that trauma bay, in that hallway where a dog still sat waiting, something had shifted. The kind of shift that does not announce itself. The kind that is simply suddenly permanently there. And not one person in that building who had watched it happen would ever look at the quiet nurse on the fourth floor the same way again. The coffee was cold. She had known it would be. Sarah set it down on the break room counter without drinking it and stood at the window for 30 seconds, doing what she always did after a high-pressure situation. She breathed. She counted. She let her hands stop moving and checked them for steadiness. They were steady. They had always been steady. That was the thing about her that nobody here knew and that she had never volunteered. Her hands did not shake. Not before, not during, not after. Not in the back of a helicopter over the Hindu Kush at 2 a.m, not in a flooded ravine in the Philippines with 3 casualties and 1 tourniquet, and not in Trauma Bay 2 of a hospital in San Diego, where a dog had more situational awareness than most of the people with medical degrees. She poured the cold coffee down the drain and got a fresh cup and went back to work. The fourth floor was steady. 2 post-op knee replacements, 1 hip revision, a 68-year-old woman named Margaret, who had been asking for her daughter since 6 a.m, and a 62-year-old retired firefighter named Lou, who kept trying to pull out his own catheter and needed to be reminded every 40 minutes why that was not a good idea. Normal, manageable, hers. She was checking Lou's chart when Daria appeared at the station with that look on her face again. The one from the trauma bay. Wide eyes, slightly parted lips, like she was still processing something. They are asking for you downstairs, Daria said. Sarah did not look up from the chart. Who is the OR? Well, not the OR. It is a man, military. He showed up about 15 minutes ago in full dress uniform, and he went directly to the desk and asked for the nurse who was in Trauma Bay 2 this morning. Sarah wrote another line. Tell him I am on shift. Sarah, he has a lot of ribbons on his jacket. Lou, stop touching that, Sarah said without turning around. I am not touching anything, Lou said. You were about to. That is speculation. She closed the chart and finally looked at Daria. What did this man say exactly? He said he needed to speak with the nurse who handled the K9 on intake. He said it was a matter of operational security. Daria paused. He said, please. That last word was the one that moved on. In her experience, men with a lot of ribbons on their jackets did not often use please when they were talking to floor nurses at regional hospitals. Either something was wrong or something was very right, and she needed to know which. Cover Lou, she said. I do not need covering, Lou said. I am fine. Lou, Sarah said. I am fine. You are one moment of boredom away from a very bad decision. She left Daria at the station and took the stairs instead of the elevator because she needed the 20 seconds to think. The man waiting for her at the ground floor nurse's station was a Navy captain, and the name on his jacket read Decker. He was somewhere in his mid-50s with the particular posture of someone who had spent decades making sure other people's spines were straight. When he saw her come through the stairwell door, he straightened further, which she had not thought was possible. Nurse Calloway, he said. Captain, she said. How can I help you? He did not look around before he spoke, which told her he was used to having conversations in spaces that were not private and had learned not to let that stop him. Lieutenant Commander Reyes is in surgery. His prognosis, I am told, is favorable, largely because of your intervention this morning. I wanted to deliver that personally. His surgical team deserves that message, she said. I got him to the door. The door was the hard part, Decker said. Anyone can walk through a door that is already open. He looked at her with the kind of directness that senior military officers develop and never entirely turn off. You served with the 38th. It was the second time in one morning someone had identified her past from 3 inches of ink on her forearm. She was starting to think she should have worn long sleeves. I did, she said. How long? 6 years active, 2 deployments, 1 extension. And she kept her voice even factual the way she always spoke about that part of her life. Not proud, not dismissive, just accurate. Decker nodded slowly like he was filing something away. Ghost accepted you immediately. He accepted the insignia, she said, and the body language. He was doing his job. I was doing mine. Nurse Calloway. Decker tilted his head slightly. Ghost has been with Reyes for 4 years. In 4 years, that dog has accepted exactly 3 people outside of his immediate team. We know who 2 of them are. You are the 3rd, and you are the 1st civilian. He paused. That is not insignificant. Sarah looked at him carefully. Captain, with respect, is there something specific you need from me because I have a full floor upstairs and a patient who is in an ongoing argument with his own catheter? Something happened at the corner of Decker's mouth that was almost a smile and then was not. There is a situation, he said, and I am not in a position to brief you fully in this hallway, but I need to know if you are willing to be involved. Involved in what? In making sure that when the Lieutenant Commander Reyes comes out of surgery, he comes out into a situation that does not finish what those bullets started. The words landed carefully and settled into the floor with weight. Sarah stared at him. What does that mean? It means, Decker said, and now his voice dropped half a register, that the people who put him in that trauma bay this morning know where he is. And they know that if he survives, he becomes a very significant problem for them. And hospitals, Nurse Calloway, are not fortresses. The break room on the 2nd floor had a small table and 4 chairs and a coffee maker that was marginally better than the one on the 4th floor. Decker closed the door and they sat across from each other, and he put a manila folder on the table between them and then did not open it. I am going to give you information, he said, and then I am going to give you a choice. The information is classified at a level that I am bending significant rules to share in this building. The choice is entirely yours, and there will be no professional consequence either way. Are we clear? We are clear, Sarah said. He opened the folder. Lieutenant Commander David Reyes had been leading a covert surveillance operation in a network that extended from the border into San Diego itself. He had been in the city for 11 days operating under civilian cover when he was ambushed 3 blocks from the hospital in the early morning hours by individuals with specific knowledge of his location and his route. The 2 agents who had been with him were deceased. Reyes had driven himself bleeding to within a block of the ER before losing consciousness. Ghost had been in the vehicle. Someone told them where he was, Sarah said. Yes, Decker said. Someone inside. Decker did not answer. He did not need to. She looked at the photo in the folder. Reyes at what looked like a team briefing healthy alert, the kind of man who looked like he had been built specifically for the work he was doing. Ghost visible at his left side. What do you need from me? She asked. Ghost will not allow federal agents near that recovery room, Decker said. We have tried twice this morning already. He accepted the hospital staff that came in with you earlier, but any new face that presents with tactical posture, he flags it. He is not wrong to flag it given the circumstances, but it means we cannot establish the security perimeter we need without someone he trusts anchoring the operation. You want me to be the anchor, she said. I want you to be willing, he said. That is different. She sat back in the chair. Outside the break room, she could hear the regular sounds of a hospital moving through its morning. Cartwheels, a paging announcement, someone laughing at the far end of a hallway. The whole ordinary machinery of a place built to keep people alive. She thought about Lou upstairs arguing with his catheter. She thought about Margaret asking for her daughter. She thought about the version of herself that had come to this hospital, specifically to be small, to take up less space, to not be the person in the room who made the hard calls in hard places. She thought about how that version of herself had lasted exactly until this morning. Who else knows about this meeting? She asked. My aide outside, and the charge nurse who directed me to you. Her name is Janelle Shero, Sarah said. Yes. Can you trust her? Decker paused just a fraction of a second. We believe so. That is not the same as yes. No, he said. It is not. She leaned forward and looked at the folder again. Not at Reyes, at the operational map in the lower left corner of the second page. She looked at it for exactly 8 seconds, and then she looked up at Decker. There is a problem with your perimeter, she said. He frowned. I have not told you what the perimeter looks like. You do not have to. The OR is on the third floor east wing. Recovery is adjacent. There is a service corridor that runs parallel to the recovery wing that connects to the parking structure on the north side of the building. That corridor has 3 access points, and I would bet every dollar I have that exactly none of them are in your current plan because nobody in a tactical briefing thinks about service corridors in a hospital unless they have spent serious time working inside one. Decker stared at her. That corridor, she said, is how linen gets moved. It is how pharmacy does late transfers. It is how I would come in if I did not want anyone at the main desk to know I was here. He was very still for a moment. Then he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and took out a phone and typed something and waited. 20 seconds later, his expression shifted in a way that confirmed what she had said without him saying a word. The corridor was not flagged, he said quietly. It never is, she said. He looked at her across the table with an expression that was recalibrating something significant. Nurse Calloway, I came here to ask for your help with a dog. I know, she said. I think I may need considerably more than that. I know that too, she said. She looked at the folder one more time. At Reyes. At Ghost, barely visible in the corner of the photo, always at the left side, always watching. A twin who had been trained to trust specific things and had spent 4 years learning exactly who was safe and who was not. A dog who had let her through this morning, not because she had introduced herself, not because anyone vouched for her, but because she carried something on her body that told the truth about who she was, even when she was choosing not to tell it herself. That was the thing about ink, she thought. It did not have an off day. It did not read the room and decide to keep quiet. It just said what it said always to anyone who knew how to look. She pushed back her chair and stood up. I need to make 2 calls before I agree to anything, she said. One is personal. One is to my charge nurse to get my floor covered. After that, you can brief me on the rest. She picked up the folder and held it out to him. And Captain, the next briefing we do needs to be in a room that does not have a window with a sight line to the parking structure. Because whoever set up this morning knew enough to follow Reyes on foot, which means they knew his face, and if they know his face, they probably know the faces of the people trying to protect him. She walked to the door and opened it. Behind her, she heard Decker say something. Quiet almost to himself, the way people speak when they are thinking out loud without meaning to. She caught the last 4 words. They were, where did you come from? She did not answer. She stepped out into the hallway and let the door close behind her and kept walking because there was work to do, and standing still had never once helped anyone she was trying to save. On the 3rd floor behind locked surgical doors, David Reyes was still on the table. In the recovery hallway, Ghost was still waiting. And in the service corridor that nobody had thought to check, a door that should have been locked had been opened from the outside with a key that did not belong to the hospital. It had been opened 4 minutes ago. Sarah was halfway up the stairs when her pager went off. Not her hospital pager, the other one. The one she kept clipped to the inside of her scrub pocket that almost nobody had ever seen and that had not made a sound in 14 months. She stopped on the landing between the 2nd and 3rd floor and looked at the number on the screen. She did not recognize it, but she recognized the prefix. And the prefix told her everything she needed to know about who was on the other end and what kind of call this was going to be. She reversed direction without hesitation. She was back at the 2nd floor break room in 45 seconds. Decker was still there, standing now, his phone already in his hand, with an expression that told her he had just received the same information she had. The corridor, she said. We have movement, he said. My man on the north end just reported a door that should be secured is showing open on his monitor. How long ago did it open? 6, maybe 7 minutes. Then we are already behind, she said. She did not say it with panic. She said it the way you state a weather forecast, a fact that required immediate adjustment. Where is Ghost right now? Decker spoke into his phone. Waited, his jaw tightened. Still in the recovery hallway, outside the surgical suite. And Reyes. Still in surgery, estimated 30 more minutes on the table. Sarah ran the numbers in her head. 30 minutes, a compromised service corridor, a recovery room that would be occupied the moment surgery concluded, a dog that was the only early warning system currently functional in that wing of the building, and a security perimeter that had just been exposed as having a hole in it large enough to drive a vehicle through. "You need to move Ghost," she said. "Ghost does not move on command from—" "I know, that is why I need to go up there right now." She was already at the door. "Get your people to the north stairwell. Not the service corridor, they will expect coverage there now. The stairwell that connects to the sub-basement laundry and comes up behind the recovery nurse's station. There is a door at the top that looks like a utility closet from the outside, and most of the staff think it is a utility closet. It is not. It connects directly to the recovery hallway." Decker stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Because on my third week here, I got turned around looking for the linen room at midnight and ended up somewhere I was not supposed to be. And the lesson I took from that was to understand every inch of this building in case I ever needed to." She pushed the door open. "Do you want to ask more questions, or do you want to move?" He moved. The third-floor recovery hallway had that specific kind of quiet that hospitals develop in the late morning, after the early rush, and before the afternoon complications. Two nurses at the station, both looking at monitors. Neither of them aware that 6 minutes ago, a door in the service corridor had been opened by someone who was not supposed to be in the building. Ghost saw Sarah before she was fully through the stairwell door. His head came up, his ears went forward, and then in the same motion that had stopped every person in Trauma Bay too cold that morning, his body oriented toward her, and this time instead of a warning, it was something else, recognition. He stood up from his sit position and moved toward her with his tail low and his attention total. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey, I know, I need you to come with me." She did not have a lead. She did not have a command word. She had only what she had always had, which was the knowledge of how to be in the presence of an animal that was smarter than most people gave it credit for, and the patience to let it make its own decision. Ghost pressed his nose against her left forearm, against the tattoo. He held it there for 3 full seconds, and then he looked up at her face and she looked back at him, and something passed between them that was beyond language. He stepped to her left side. She started walking. One of the recovery nurses, a heavy-set man named Frank, who had been at this hospital for 11 years and had seen most things, looked up from his station and watched a floor nurse he vaguely recognized walk past with a military working dog at her heel, like it had been doing that for years. And he opened his mouth and then he closed it again, and then he went back to his monitor, because some things in a hospital are above your pay grade, and knowing which things those are is a survival skill. Sarah moved Ghost to the far end of the recovery hallway, away from the main entrance, into the alcove near the emergency exit where the family waiting chairs were placed. She crouched beside him and put her hand on his neck, and felt the tension that was running through every muscle in his body. He knew. He did not know what he knew, not specifically, not in words, but she had worked with enough trained animals to understand that they process threat at a frequency humans had long since lost. Something in this building was wrong, and Ghost had known it before Decker's man reported the open door, and he had been sitting in that hallway not just out of loyalty, but out of a working instinct that was screaming at a register nobody else could hear. "I hear it too," she said very quietly just to him. Her pager went off again. Same prefix. She pulled it out and looked at it and felt the blood in her veins do something very specific and very controlled. The message was 4 words. No name, no explanation. It read, "They know your face." She looked at it for 2 seconds. Then she stood up. Decker appeared at the far end of the hallway, moving fast with his aide, and 2 men in plain clothes who carried themselves with the unmistakable economy of people whose job was to be invisible in public spaces and had gotten very good at it. He crossed to her without slowing down. "We have a confirmed ID on the corridor," he said. "One individual male carrying a hospital-issue ID that cleared the electronic lock. The ID belongs to a dietary worker who called in sick this morning." "So they have someone inside," Sarah said. "Had Beratan," Decker said. "We pulled every badge issued to dietary services in the last 30 days. One of them was a replacement badge issued 8 days ago after the original was reported lost. The replacement was issued to a name that does not match any employee currently on the payroll roster." "Someone walked into your HR process and created a ghost employee," Sarah said. "In a hospital, the irony is not lost on me," Decker said. Then his voice dropped all pretense of calm. What that means is that whoever is running this operation planned it before Reyes was even shot. They already had access to this building. The attack this morning was not opportunistic. It was coordinated, and the second phase was always going to happen here. The words hit the floor hard. Sarah felt Ghost shift at her side. His ears went flat. They are already in the building, she said. It was not a question. Decker looked at his phone. His face did not change, which in her experience meant the news was bad. We believe so. Yes. The next 30 seconds were the fastest thinking she had done since the Hindu Kush. She laid out the variables the way she had been trained to, not with emotion, with geometry. One compromise access point, one unidentified individual with valid building credentials, a target who was currently in surgery and therefore stationary, a recovery room that would become occupied in approximately 25 minutes, a dog that was her only functional early warning system, and a message on a pager telling her that someone knew what she looked like. "Who sent me this?" she asked, holding up the pager. Decker looked at it. Something moved across his face. "That number is not one of ours." "I know it is not one of yours," she said. "I asked who sent it." "I do not know," he said, and she believed him. And that was the most unsettling part of all of it. Someone had her pager number. Someone who was not on Decker's team and was not on her contacts list had reached a communication device that she had not given to anyone in this hospital, that was registered under a name she had not used in over 2 years, and had sent her a warning, which meant someone was helping her, and she had absolutely no idea who. She pulled out her cell phone and called Janelle. Janelle picked up on the second ring. "Sarah, what is—" "I need you to listen to me and not ask questions right now," Sarah said. "I need the patient census for the third-floor recovery wing. Every patient currently listed, and I need to know if any admissions to that wing happened in the last 4 hours that were not connected to a scheduled surgery." A pause, keys clicking. "There are 6 patients in recovery, 4 from scheduled procedures this morning, 1 emergency appendectomy from overnight who is being held for observation, and 1, another pause, longer this time, 1 admission listed as a transfer from the ERR chest pain evaluation. Checked in at 8:52. What time did the ER report him as transferred?" "Sarah, the ER has no record of this transfer." Ghost made a sound, not a growl, something lower. "An alert." Sarah looked at him. He was looking at the main recovery door. His body was perfectly still. "Janelle," Sarah said, "lock down the third-floor nursing station and do not let anyone in or out without a badge check. Right now, do not argue with me." She ended the call before Janelle could respond. "There is a false patient in recovery," she said to Decker. "Room number." He had already heard enough. He was on his phone. His aide was moving toward the recovery station. One of the plainclothesmen was talking quietly into a collar mic that Sarah had not noticed until this moment. "Room 7, Decker said. Sarah looked at the recovery hallway layout in her mind. Room 7 was 2 doors from the room Reyes would be placed in when he came out of surgery. 2 doors, in a quiet hallway, with minimal staff. Exactly where you would want to be if you needed to complete what had been started this morning 3 blocks from this building. Ghost was still looking at the door. His entire body had gone to the specific kind of still that was not calm. It was the stillness of a spring that is fully compressed, the kind that releases in one direction only. "Ghost," Sarah said. Her voice was completely level. "Hold." He held. Decker looked at her with an expression that had stopped pretending to be anything other than what it was, which was a senior military officer looking at someone who was running a tactical situation with more precision than the people he had brought with him. "We need to evacuate recovery," he said. "We cannot evacuate recovery without alerting whoever is in room 7 that we notify," she said. "The moment they know, this becomes a different kind of situation. We need to go in quiet." "You are a nurse," he said, not dismissively, almost like a reminder for both of them. "I am a nurse," she agreed, "which means I can walk into room 7 right now and perform a routine vitals check, and nobody in that room will think twice about it because nurses walk into rooms every 15 minutes and nobody ever looks twice at them." She pulled her stethoscope from around her neck and held it up. "That is the tactical advantage you have that none of your plainclothes people have. I am invisible in this building. You said so yourself." Decker stared at her. "Captain," she said, "I am not asking for permission. I am telling you what I am going to do. What I am asking is whether your people will be in position before I open that door." He looked at her for one long moment. Then he spoke into his phone. "All units, third floor recovery. 30 seconds, room 7 adjacent. Soft approach." He looked back at her. 30 seconds. She nodded. She looked down at Ghost. "Stay," she said. "Stay with him." She walked toward the recovery doors. Behind her, Ghost watched her go. He did not follow. He stayed exactly where she had told him to stay, positioned between the alcove and the hallway, and he watched the door close behind her, and then he turned his attention back to the main entrance and resumed the vigilance that had not broken since the moment this morning when a man he loved had been brought through a set of hospital doors barely alive. Inside the recovery wing, Sarah walked past 5 rooms without breaking stride, nodding at the nurse near the station, picking up the vitals log from the cart without stopping in front of room 7, with the clipboard in her hand and the stethoscope ready and nothing on her face except the specific professional neutrality of someone doing the 14th routine check of their shift. She put her hand on the door. 28 seconds had elapsed. She pushed it open. The man in the bed was sitting up, not lying down the way chest pain patients were positioned, not connected to the monitoring leads that should have been placed on admission, not in a hospital gown. He was sitting up on the edge of the bed in the street clothes with a phone in one hand and something she could not immediately identify in the other. And when the door opened, he looked up, and for exactly 1/2 of 1 second, both of them were completely still. Then everything happened at once. She did not scream. She did not run. She did not do any of the things that the reasonable part of a person's brain screams for in the first half second of confronting something dangerous. She stepped fully into the room and let the door swing shut behind her. The man on the bed was already moving, sliding off the edge with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done exactly this kind of thing before, and the object in his right hand was now clearly visible and clearly not something that belonged in any hospital room in the country. He was between her and the door in 2 steps, which meant she had made herself the obstacle between him and the hallway, which was exactly what she had intended. "Vitals check," she said. Her voice came out completely steady. She held up the clipboard. "I just need 2 minutes." He stared at her. She stared back. She was counting. 28 seconds when she walked in, 2 seconds to cross the room. She needed 20 more, and she needed him to spend them looking at her face instead of the door. "Sir, I understand you are not feeling well, but I need to confirm your readings before the attending can sign off on your chart." She took 1 step toward him, not threatening, not retreating, the specific measured movement of a nurse who does this all day and has no idea that anything is wrong. "If you could just sit back down for me." "Get out," he said. His voice was flat, no accent she could immediately place. His eyes were doing a rapid calculation she recognized because she had done it herself in darker places than this. He was measuring her, deciding what category she fell into. She needed him to put her in the wrong category for 10 more seconds. "Sir, I cannot leave without completing the check. It is policy. If you want, I can get the attending in here right now, but that is going to take significantly longer, and I know you probably just want to get home." She took another small step. 2 minutes. His jaw tightened. He looked at the door. He looked at her. He made a decision. It was the wrong decision for him and the right one for her. He reached for her arm. The door came off its hinges. Not literally, but the force with which Decker's 2 plainclothes agents entered the room produced a sound and a displacement of air that was close enough, and the man from the bed had exactly enough time to register that he had been outmaneuvered before the first agent had his right arm and the second had his left, and the phone and the device hit the floor in separate directions, and the room went from dangerous to contained in approximately 4 seconds. Sarah stepped back against the wall and let them work. It was loud for about 6 seconds. Then it was very quiet. Decker came through the door 30 seconds behind his agents. He looked at the man now secured on the floor. He looked at Sarah against the wall with her clipboard still in her hand. He looked at the device on the floor near the bed, which one of the agents was already photographing without touching. "Are you hurt?" Decker said. "No," she said. "What did you say to him?" "I told him I needed to check his vitals." Decker looked at her for a moment. "And he believed you?" For long enough, she said. One of the agents crouched near the dying and spoke quietly into his collar mic. Whatever he said made Decker's face do something complicated and controlled. He crossed the room and crouched beside the agent and looked at the device and then stood back up and looked at the ceiling for exactly 2 seconds in the way that people look at ceilings when they are processing something they did not want to be true. Signal emitter, Decker said. High frequency. It would have disrupted the monitoring equipment in the adjacent rooms, Pacific adjacent rooms. He looked at Sarah. It was not a weapon. It was a jammer designed to create a window. A window for what? She said. He looked at her steadily. A window for whoever came through the service corridor. The room went cold because the man on the floor was not the threat. He was the distraction. He was the piece that was meant to pull the security response into one location while something else moved through a different one entirely. Sarah was already moving. Ghost, she said to no one in the room, to herself, to the dog, 3 rooms away, that she could not see but could feel like a frequency in her chest. Ghost is going to hear it before we do. She was in the hallway before Decker finished his next sentence. The recovery hallway was exactly as she had left it, except for one thing. The alcove at the far end, where she had positioned Ghost, was empty. She stopped. She looked at the empty alcove. She looked at the hallway in both directions. She looked at the recovery station where Frank was no longer sitting and whose chair was pushed back at an angle that suggested he had left it quickly. Ghost, she said, not a call, not a command, just his name the way you say a name when you are afraid of what the answer is going to be. From somewhere behind the far recovery door, the one that led to the sub-level access stairwell that she had told Decker about, she heard it. Not a bark, not the warning growl from this morning. Something different. A sustained, focused vocalization that she had only heard in the field in very specific circumstances that meant one thing and one thing only. Active engagement. Contact made. She hit the door running. The stairwell behind the recovery wing was narrow and badly lit and smelled like industrial cleaner and old concrete, and at the bottom of the first landing, Frank, the recovery nurse, was pressed flat against the wall with his hands raised and his eyes wide, and the expression of a man who had taken a wrong turn and ended up somewhere his 11 years of hospital work had not prepared him for. At the foot of the stairs, Ghost had a man pinned against the wall with a grip that was not releasing and a focus that was absolute. The man was not fighting anymore. He had stopped fighting, which was the intelligent decision, and he was very still and very pale and speaking in a low, continuous voice that was probably meant to be calming and was not working. Sarah came down the stairs, and Ghost's eyes found her immediately without releasing his hold. Good boy, she said. Good. Hold. She looked at the man. He looked back at her. He was in the hospital-issue maintenance uniform that the compromised dietary badge would have gotten him past the initial check. He had a bag over one shoulder that she did not need to open to understand the purpose of. Do not move, she said to him. Do not speak. Do not make a single decision right now, because every decision you make in the next 60 seconds is going to define the rest of your life, and the best one you can make is to do exactly nothing. He did exactly nothing. Frank made a small sound from the landing above. I just came down to check the linen order, he said. There was a noise and Frank, Sarah said, go back upstairs. Lock the recovery station door. Do not let anyone in or out. Call down to security and give them this stairwell location. Can you do that? Yes, Frank said. He sounded like a man who was very committed to doing exactly that and never coming near this stairwell again. He went back upstairs. Decker arrived 40 seconds later with both agents and his aide, and a level of controlled urgency that told Sarah the situation in room 7 had been secured, and the full picture of what had been attempted was now becoming clear. He took one look at Ghost and the man against the wall and pulled out his phone. The next 15 minutes were the organized chaos of a containment that had worked, which is a very different energy from the case of one that has not. People moved with purpose instead of panic. Communications were clipped and precise. The man from the stairwell was separated from the man from room 7, and both were handled by people whose professional training existed specifically for this moment. Sarah stood in the recovery hallway with Ghost at her side and watched it all happen and let herself feel for exactly 90 seconds the particular physical release that comes after sustained high alert focus. It was not relief, It was not pride. It was closer to the feeling of a held breath, finally let go, the way your body reminds you that it was working very hard while your mind was telling it there was no time for that. Ghost leaned against her left leg. She put her hand on his head. They stood like that together, the nurse and the dog, in the recovery hallway of a hospital in San Diego on an ordinary Wednesday morning that had been anything but. Then her pager went off again. The same prefix, the same unknown number, this time 2 words. It read, "He is awake." She stared at the message for 3 seconds. Then she looked up. Through the recovery doors, through the surgical suite beyond, in a room she could not see, from where she was standing, David Reyes had come through the other side of the operation that had started when she put her hands on him in Trauma Bay 2 and refused to step back. He was awake. She found Decker near the stairwell entrance, wrapping up a call. "Reyes is out of surgery," she said. He looked at his phone, then at her. "How did you know before I did?" She held up the pager. He stared at it. His expression moved through 3 distinct phases in about 4 seconds. Surprise, assessment, something that in anyone else she would have called unease. "That number again," he said. "That number again," she agreed. "I think it is time you told me whether you have any idea who is on the other end of it. Because whoever it is has had accurate information all morning, and they have been giving it specifically to me, not to you, which means they know me. Or they know of me. And that is something I need to understand." Decker looked at the pager for a long moment. Then he looked at her with an expression that was making a decision. "There is someone," he said slowly, "who has been running parallel intelligence on this operation for the past 3 weeks. Not federally sanctioned. Personal. Someone who had their own reasons for wanting Reyes protected. We were aware of this person's existence, but not their methods and not their specific contacts." He paused. "We did not know they had your number." "Who is it?" Sarah said. Decker opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "I think you should hear that from Reyes." She stared at him. "What does Reyes have to do with who has my pager number?" "Everything," Decker said, and his voice had something in it that she had not heard from him all morning. Something that was not tactical, something that was personal. "Nurse Calloway, the man on that table this morning, he did not end up in your hospital by accident. The street where he was found, the route he was on. He met her eyes directly. He knew this hospital. He had studied this hospital, not because it was the nearest trauma center, because he knew who worked here." The hallway was very quiet. Sarah heard her own heartbeat for the first time all morning. "That is not possible," she said. "He did not know me. I have never met him." "No," Decker said, "but he knew your record. He knew your history with the 38th. And when his team pulled his operational notes from 3 weeks ago, when he was planning contingencies for this mission, there was a name on the emergency contact protocol that was not a military contact." He paused. "It was yours." She did not move. "Someone who trusted him told him who you were," Decker said. "Someone who knew both of you. And that same someone has apparently had your pager number for a long time and chose this morning to use it." Ghost shifted at her side. He looked up at her face the way dogs do when they sense the change in a person, for the person fully knows it themselves. She thought about the 6 years with the 38th. The people she had worked beside in places that did not appear on public maps. The ones she had carried out, and the ones she had not been able to carry out, and the ones who had carried her when the situation called for it. The network of people who knew your name, not because they had met you in a conference room, but because they had met you in the worst possible version of a moment and found out what you were made of. She thought about one name in particular, a name she had not spoken in 3 years. A person who had her pager number because she had given it to him herself in a parking lot outside Bethesda Naval Hospital the day she transferred out, when she said to him, half joking and completely serious, "If anything ever goes sideways, this is how you reach me." His name was Marcus Webb. And the last time she had seen him, he was getting on a transport to an assignment that was classified above her clearance level and telling her not to worry. She looked at the pager, she looked at the prefix one more time, and something she had been carrying for 3 years, something she had set down and walked away from and covered with a quiet life, and a floor nursing shift and cold coffee moved inside her chest with the specific weight of something that had never actually gone anywhere. "I need to see Reyes," she said. "He is asking for you," Decker said. "He has been asking since he came out of anesthesia. It is the only thing he has said." Ghost made a sound beside her. Not a growl, not an alert. Something quieter, something that in a person you would have called relief. She started walking toward the surgical suite. Decker fell into step on her right side. Ghost moved on her left. Three people walking down a hospital corridor on an ordinary Wednesday morning, and not one thing about any of it was ordinary. And the part of the story that she had thought ended when she capped her pen at the nurse's station that morning had not ended at all. It had only just told her what it actually was. The surgical suite recovery room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, and the particular stillness of a space where serious things had recently happened and were not entirely finished happening yet. Sarah pushed open the door. David Reyes was propped at a 45-degree angle with two IVs running and a pulse oximeter on his left index finger, and the look of a man who had been pulled back from somewhere very far away and was still getting his bearings. His face was the gray pale she remembered from the trauma bay, but underneath it now was something that had not been there before. Color at the edges, the slow return of a person to their own body. His eyes found her the moment she walked in. They were dark brown and very alert, which surprised her because most people coming out of the kind of surgery he had just been through had a lag, a delay between the eyes opening and the person actually being present. Reyes had no lag. He looked at her like he had been waiting and had used the waiting time to prepare exactly what he wanted to say. Ghost crossed the room in 4 steps and put his head on the edge of the bed, and Reyes put his right hand on the dog's neck without looking down, the automatic gesture of two beings who had been doing this for 4 years and did not need to see each other to know the other was there. "Calloway," Reyes said. His voice was rough from the intubation, but the steadiness underneath it was intact. "Sarah Calloway." "Lieutenant Commander," she said. "David," he said. "Please." He looked at her for a moment. "You are exactly what he said you were." She stood at the foot of the bed with her stethoscope still around her neck and her clipboard still in her hand because she had not put it down yet, and she realized she had been holding it like a tether since room 7, and she finally set it on the side table. "Marcus Webb told you about me," she said. Not a question. 3 weeks ago, Reyes said, during the operational planning phase, I was building the contingency protocols and I asked him who he trusted most in a crisis. Not operationally, not tactically. Who he trusted most when everything had already gone wrong and you needed someone who would not fold. He paused to breathe carefully the way people breathe when their chest has recently been worked on. He did not even think about it. He said your name, first and only. Something moved through Sarah's chest. She kept her face steady. "Where is Marcus now?" she said. Reyes looked at her. The alertness in his eyes did something. Not dimmed exactly, focused differently. "That," he said, "is the part Decker was supposed to tell you on the way up here." She turned. Decker was standing just inside the door. He had the look of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was about to set it down in a room that was not prepared for the weight of it. "Tell me," she said. Decker breathed in through his nose. "Marcus Webb has been running a parallel intelligence operation on the network that targeted Reyes for 7 months. Unsanctioned. Personal. He identified the organization 18 months ago during a separate operation, and when the formal investigation stalled due to jurisdictional complications, he went private. He has been the source feeding Reyes' team verified intelligence for the past quarter." "Where is he?" Sarah said. Her voice was very even. "He is in this city," Decker said. "He has been in this city for 11 days. He has been running this operation from the outside, coordinating with Reyes, and this morning when the ambush happened, he was 3 blocks away." "He was there." Her voice did not crack. She made sure of that. "He was the one who got Ghost into the vehicle," Decker said. "Reyes was already unconscious. Webb put the dog in the car, set the navigation, and got Reyes moving toward the hospital." He paused. "And then he went back." "Back where?" "Back to the scene because there were still 2 people on the ground and he was not willing to leave them even though they were already gone. And when the secondary response team arrived, the same organization that set up the ambush, they found him there." The room was very quiet. Sarah was aware of Reyes watching her. She was aware of Ghost watching her. She was aware of Decker looking at the floor, which was where people looked when they did not want to be the face that delivered news. "Is he alive?" she said. Yes, Decker said immediately. Yes, he is alive. But he is being held, and we did not know the location until 45 minutes ago, when the two individuals we secured in this building were separated and interviewed, and the second one gave up a location in exchange for a conversation with a federal attorney. Sarah sat down, not dramatically, not with collapse. She simply found the chair near the side table and sat in it because her legs had made a decision that she did not entirely argue with. You have the location, she said. We have the location, Decker said. Then why are you in this room instead of at that location? Decker looked at her. Because the location is a secured facility with a two-person entry protocol and a verification system that requires a specific access credential that our teams do not have. It is not a door we can breach quickly or quietly without triggering a secondary protocol call that we believe would result in the immediate elimination of anyone being held inside. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. And you need something from me. Webb listed you, Decker said, in his own operational documents, separate from what he gave Reyes in the section marked Emergency Authorization Contacts. He listed your name and your pager number under a protocol he titled Guardian Response. Decker reached into his jacket and put a single sheet of paper on the side table next to her clipboard. The access credential for the facility is a 12-digit code. Webb encoded it. The encoding key is a personal reference that means nothing to anyone on my team. The document says the key is something only one person would know. Sarah looked at the paper without touching it. He wrote one line of context, Decker said. She will know it from the night in the ravine. The thing she said before the extraction. She will know. The night in the ravine. She had not thought about the night in the ravine in 3 years. She had not allowed herself to think about it because some memories have a gravitational pull that you have to actively counter if you want to function normally. And she had been functioning normally for 3 years, and the cost of that was keeping certain memories in a room with the door closed. The ravine, Philippines, second deployment, a situation that had gone from manageable to catastrophic in about 40 seconds and had required 12 hours of improvised field medicine in a drainage channel with 2 casualties, one critical one unconscious, and Marcus Webb on the radio, talking her through the wait for extraction because the weather had grounded the birds and there was nothing to do but hold on and keep the living alive. At 4 a.m, 3 hours before the extraction finally came, she had said something to him, not tactical, not procedural. Something real said in the dark to the voice on the radio when she was past the point of maintaining professional composure and simply needed to say something true out loud. She had said the only thing that makes any of this mean something is that we do not leave. And he had said, say that again. And she had said it again. And then they had not spoken for another hour because there was nothing to add to it. She touched the paper. She picked up the pen from the side table. She wrote 12 digits. She handed it to Decker. He looked at it. He looked at her. He took out his phone and read the number to someone on the other end, slowly, precisely, and then he listened, and his face changed in the way faces change when something that was uncertain becomes certain in the right direction. Confirmed, he said. He lowered the phone. The code is valid. She nodded. My team is moving now, he said. ETA to location is 11 minutes. I need to go. Go, she said. He was at the door when she said his name. He turned. Bring him back, she said. Decker looked at her with that expression she had been cataloging all morning, the one that kept revising its assessment of who she was. He nodded once, then he was gone. The room held the specific quiet of after. Reyes was watching her. Ghost had his chin still resting on the bed. The monitors beeped in their patient rhythm. He talked about you, Reyes said. More than once, he was not the type of man who talked about people easily. I know, she said. He said you were the most capable person he had ever worked with and that you had no idea. Reyes paused. He also said you made the worst coffee he had ever tasted in the field. Something happened at the corner of her mouth. He was not wrong about either. They sat in the quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that is not empty. Thank you, Reyes said, and his voice when he said it was not formal. Not the thank you of a superior to a subordinate or a patient to a medical professional. It was the thank you of one person to another person who had stood between them and the end of things. For this morning, for the corridor, for the room, he looked at her steadily. for not stepping back when Briggs told you to. I have been stepping back for 2 years, she said. I was overdue. Why did you stop, he asked. The work. Why did you leave the unit and come here? She considered the question, not whether to answer it, but how to answer it honestly in a way that did not take longer than it needed to. Because I was good at saving people in the field, she said, and I needed to find out if I was good at it without the adrenaline, without the crisis forcing the decision, without the uniform and the mission briefing telling me what to do. She looked at her hands. I needed to know if I would still do the right thing when nobody expected me to, when it was easier not to. Reyes was quiet for a moment. And apparently yes, she said. He almost smiled. It pulled at the side of his face where the anesthesia was still wearing off. Marcus said something else. He said that the hardest thing about you was not getting you to act. It was getting you to let people see it when you did. She did not answer that. There was nothing to add to it because it was accurate and they both knew it. Her pager went off. She grabbed it. The same prefix. The same unknown number. One word. Out. She stared at it. The words sat there on the small screen, completely simple, carrying the entire weight of 11 minutes of her life that she had spent sitting very still and pretending she was not waiting. Out. She exhaled. It was not a small exhale. It was the kind that starts somewhere below the sternum and takes everything with it on the way up, and she let it go completely and did not try to make it quiet or controlled. Reyes watched her face and understood everything that one word meant without being told. Ghost lifted his head from the bed, looked at her, and his tail moved. Once. Twice. The slow, deliberate wag of a boy who has been tense for a very long time and is only now allowing himself to relax because the person beside him has finally done so. 40 minutes later, Marcus Webb walked into Sharp Memorial Hospital under his own power, which the paramedics had argued about and lost with a split lip and 2 cracked ribs, in the particular look of a man who had been through something and was not yet ready to process it, but was also not willing to sit down until he had confirmed with his own eyes that the things he had spent 7 months protecting were still intact. Sarah was at the ground floor nurses station when he came through the main entrance. She heard him before she saw him because she would have known that specific combination of stride and breathing pattern in any building in any country in the world. She turned around. He looked terrible. He looked exactly like someone who had been held by hostile individuals for several hours and had not had an easy time of it. He was also looking directly at her with an expression that she recognized because she had worn it herself in a drainage channel in the Philippines at 4 a.m. when the extraction birds finally came over the ridge. He stopped 6 feet away. She looked at him. He looked at her. You still have the pager, he said. You still have the number, she said. He breathed out. It was as large and uncontrolled as hers had been upstairs. I did not know if you would still be here. I told you where I transferred to, she said. You could have called. I did not want to pull you back into something you had decided to leave. Marcus, she said. I spent 2 years trying to be someone who keeps her head down and does not make waves, and this morning a dog looked at my arm and decided I was still who I used to be, and I think maybe I have been spending a lot of energy arguing with something that was never going to change. He looked at her tattoo, at the guardian angel and the parachute and the small, clean letters underneath. Ghost knew, he said. Ghost had always knew, she said. He just needed me to show him. Behind her, Janelle had appeared at the nurse's station and was looking at this exchange with an expression of someone who was extremely curious and extremely professional about it and was filing everything away for later. Frank had apparently returned to the recovery station and would be discussing this morning at dinner for the next decade. Dr. Harlan Briggs had completed the surgery on David Reyes successfully and was writing his post-op notes in his office with a quality of silence that suggested he was thinking about more than the patient. And on the 3rd floor in a recovery room, a Navy SEAL who had been shot 3 times and brought back by a woman he had planned for but never met was resting with a gene at the foot of his bed and a heart monitor, producing the steady, reliable rhythm of someone who intended to continue living. Sarah looked at the man in front of her, the man who had called her name in the dark on a radio in a Philippine ravine and made her say the true thing twice so he could remember it. The man who had studied a hospital staffing directory 3 weeks ago and put her name in his emergency protocol under the word guardian because there was no one else he would have written there. She took one step forward and she looked at him directly and she said the only thing that was true. You should have called sooner, she said. Yeah, Marcus said. I should have. And standing in the lobby of a hospital in San Diego on a Wednesday morning that had started with a dying man and a dui that would not let anyone close Sarah Calloway finally stopped stepping back. She had shown up when it mattered. She had done the thing nobody expected. She had walked toward the growl when every other person in the room had moved away from it, and everything that happened after the quarter room. 7, the stairwell, the 12-digit code written from a memory she had kept in a closed room for 3 years. All of it had flowed from that one decision made before anyone was watching, in the moment when it was easier to let Briggs win. The dog had known who she was before she was willing to say it out loud. Sometimes it takes an animal that has no capacity for pretending to remind a person that they never actually stopped being who they were. Sarah Calloway had never stopped. She had only been waiting for the right morning to prove it, and the morning had arrived on a gurney with Ghost standing guard, and she had walked straight toward it without flinching. That was who she was. That was who she had always been. And she was done pretending otherwise.